Okay, hear me out. The 747 is my all-time favorite aircraft. As well as being a passenger on them in the past, I've also been lucky enough to visit some of the 747s which are now permanently on the ground, like this one in the middle of the desert in outback Australia, this one in the middle of Paris, and this one in a small town on the east coast of Australia. I've loved the 747 for ages, and in fact, back in 2008, when we were all setting up our Twitter accounts, when that was a new thing, I wanted to be at Steph, but unfortunately that was taken, so I did what we all did, which is add a couple of numbers at the end, and I chose the three most well-known numbers in the history of aviation. But as I've had a bit of time to think over the last few weeks, I started wondering, what is it that actually makes the 747 special to me? What is it about that basically great big bus in the sky that makes me tell people it is my favourite aircraft? Longreach in outback Queensland is probably one of my favourite places to visit from an aviation perspective. In 1919, it was the birthplace of Qantas. It's where they had their first hangar. Their engineering and maintenance sheds were based there. A lot of the airmail and passenger services that first basically grew the aviation industry here in Australia originated out of Longreach. And if you fast forward from 1920 through to 2002, Qantas actually donated one of their 747s. It was City of Bunbury, Victor Hotel, Echo Bravo, Quebec, to the Qantas Founders Museum, which is based there in Longreach. And the 747s and Qantas are very closely linked. For example, and you would have seen this if you've ever been on a Qantas flight in the last couple of years, because it's in their safety demonstration video. There's a guy called Jack Grant who worked for Qantas and realised that the 747, because of its increased capacity and the number of passengers that would be on board, the slide rafts that used to be on the earlier aircraft, which were stored inside the aircraft, would take too long to get out, inflate, and safely be able to evacuate enough passengers at once. So Jack Grant invented the inflatable slide raft that actually inflates when the door is opened in an emergency, which since the 747 has then obviously gone on to be introduced into many other commercial aircraft as well. None as famous as, of course, US 1549, the Miracle on the Hudson, when Sully landed his Airbus on the Hudson River and the passengers could wait on the inflatable slide rafts instead of being plunged into the freezing waters of the Hudson River before they got rescued. Qantas and the 747s also brought us business class. Now, business class as a term had already been coined on Thai Airways a couple of years previously, but it wasn't until the 747s that companies like Pan Am and Qantas realised that there was a need for a category of class between first and economy. Now, Pan Am introduced what they called Clipper class a year or two before Qantas, but it was Qantas who came out with business class on a 747. Confusing, yes, but in terms of who invented business class, well, you could say it was Pan Am because they had Clipper class. You could say it was Thai Airways because they actually had posters with business class on it. But if you want a product that's called business class on a 747, it does seem, and Qantas definitely like to take credit for this, but it does seem that Qantas were the first to do that. And another reason why I love the 747 is there were variants of it as well. There was an SP, a special performance version of the 747. It was shorter, it could go faster, it could go higher. It was designed to get into some airports which couldn't take the huge size of the new 747s, but for airlines who still wanted to operate aircraft that could carry more passengers. People can be divided on the SP version of the 747. I personally love it, but tell me in the comments what you think about it. I think anytime you have an aircraft and then a sporty version of it, that can only be a good thing. Another 747 that I was lucky to visit recently was at the Paris Air Show last year, and it's actually based at Le Bourget Airport. And sorry to anyone from France who's watching this for my pronunciation just then. This was actually one of the original 747s. It was a 747-128 model, and it was powered by the original Pratt & Whitney engines, which used to power the 747s before General Electric and Rolls-Royce took over. It really was a great and powerful aircraft. I mean, the 747s, even the original ones, cruised at over 900 kilometers an hour, up there in the flight levels, 11 kilometers above the ground. They could cover almost 7,500 kilometers without refueling, and this one in Paris could carry up to 366 passengers at a time as well. This one made its first flight back in October 1972, and it made its first flight for Air France the year after. And right the way through until the year 2000, this aircraft flew almost 100,000 flight hours in its entire career before it was flown on its last flight to Le Bourget Airport, where it was retired, and now forms part of the Air and Space Museum down there. And if you are ever visiting France, and you get a chance to go to Paris. If you do love your aviation, it's well worth a visit. You can do a tour and walk around inside the aircraft, and they've completely opened up the back as well, so you can get a much closer look inside some of the workings of like simple things like how the plumbing systems work and the cargo facilities are located. You can look at the cockpit as well. It's great to see Paris preserving the 747 so well, and there is actually there's a second 747 here in Australia that you can go and visit about an hour south of Sydney in a place called Wollongong. And it's this 747 which is probably one of my favorites because it holds, well, not just one world record, but it holds two, and they're both brilliant. In 1989, Victor Hotel Oscar Juliet Alpha, it was also known as the City of Canberra, was based in London, and Qantas and their marketing team had this idea of trying to break the world record for the world's longest flight by a commercial airliner. Now, you'll be familiar with Project Sunrise, perhaps, which is Qantas's plan to be able to fly long-haul Airbus A350s, ultra-long-range aircraft, all the way direct from London to Sydney. They still haven't done it yet, and we're in 2024 as I record this, but this was 1989 when a 747 did exactly that. The flight across the world required months of preparation. It was done in a whole load of secrecy as well, and they even had to create some specific high-density fuel which was created in Germany for the aircraft. It was given priorities over flight levels to avoid traffic and to get favourable tailwinds. And in 1989, that wonderful 747 did exactly that. It flew non-stop for 20 hours and 9 minutes all the way from London to Sydney. That's 9,720 nautical miles or 18,001 kilometres non-stop. But it gets better because the same aircraft, City of Canberra, then broke a second world record. So it's done the world's longest flight. And now in 2015, sadly, when the aircraft was being retired, it needed to be repositioned from Sydney Kingsford Smith Airport, the main international airport in Sydney, down to Wollongong Shellharbour Airport, which is where it is now. And so that wonderful 747 broke the record for the world's shortest flight as it took off from Sydney and landed at Wollongong just 12 minutes later for the very last time. I love the 747, but I've only scratched the surface in terms of the ones that I've visited which are being preserved for us now. There are many other 747s based around the world that I still want to go and see. Like in the UK, for example, at Cotswold Airport, there's an old Negus livery, a British Airways 747, which has been converted into an event space. There's an ex-KLM 747, which was acquired by Corendon Airlines, which is a Turkish airline, which is now positioned next to a hotel in Amsterdam. There's also a 747 that was operated by Singapore Airlines and Pan Am, which is now not only stationed at Arlanda Airport in Stockholm, but it's been converted into a hotel. Or if I'm feeling really adventurous, there's the Malaysian Airlines 747 that was purposefully sunk off the coast of Bahrain, which is now being used as a kind of mini marine wildlife park, and if you're into diving, you can go and explore it. I'm not sure about that one. There are still to this day around 50 747s that are currently in operation carrying passengers around the world for airlines like Air China, Korea Air, Lufthansa, Asiana, Saudia. And there's a lot of airlines operating the 747 as cargo planes as well. So whilst the 747 might be coming to the end of its flying career, I don't think it's ready to hang up its headset just yet. As I've been making this video, I've actually been realizing I think there are a lot of similarities between me and the 747. Maybe this is why I like it so much. Okay, so we're both kids of the 1970s. We both love to travel long distances and go and explore, new countries. We both have had our fair share of technical or health interruptions over the years, and I guess to some extent we're also being overtaken by newer, faster, more modern versions of ourselves. But like the 747, because it's still flying to this day, I don't think it's ready to give up just yet, and nor am I. So I think that's probably why, if anyone asks me what my favorite aircraft is, I will still continue to answer, it's the 747. I love its strength and resilience. All right, thanks as always for watching. Big love to you all. This is Steph747 signing off. Okay, bye-bye.